Hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor Dupre. Today's guest is Alice James. Her debut novel is dealing with vampires and sexual intercourse, I have to say. So this is also, I guess, a trigger warning. Zombies. It says on the book title, zombies, vampires, croquet, and let me see here. But doesn't say. Well, it says romance, but it doesn't explicitly mention the bodily functions of all these different actors. Her debut novel is Grave Secrets. It's out from Rebellion Publishing, their Solaris imprint. It is a pleasure to have with us Ellis James. Hello, Ellis.
Hey Drax, thank you so much for inviting me on today. I'm really excited to be here. You built me a whole graveyard and it's amazing. I'm absolutely bowled over. So yeah, thank you for making today happen.
Ellis, this is really awesome to have you. I really enjoyed the book, and I'll tell you a little bit later that I may not be the target audience of this book, but I really really loved it. And it's a mix of things. There is a lot of action. There is some zombie, vampire, human violence. Um, I used to be a big horror fanatic, but I have been publicly critical of the romance genre. Now, if you were your own agent and analyst, why would you think that this book would appeal to someone like me? I mean, you probably hardly know me, but let's just say I'm a man of your sort of your we belong to the same generation. How come that someone like me who doesn't like romance likes this book?
I think it is a big genre mashup, and I think that's
Bingo.
probably why there's something in it for more people than just want to read romantic fiction. It's a whodunit. There's a murder mystery in there. There's a lot of gore. I have to say, there's a lot of heads getting ripped off. It is light horror. And yeah, there's some romance in there, but the romance is quite sarcastic. This is a woman who's never going to find true love the way that she's going about things. So it's not sort of traditional happy ever after romance in there. And it's quite funny. It's quite a sarcastic, snarky book as well. So I think there is romance in there. There's a lot of shagging. Yes, it's true. You talked about
Shagging.
vampire sex. There's a lot of shagging in there.
I had to look this up because I mean I learned British English in school, but then I went to America and all this British English went out the window and it was like shagging. What are they talking about? Oh, wait a minute. Yes, Austin Powers brought that term to the Americas. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So I don't think they would have taught you that in high school when you were learning the English language. No, sadly, this essential word probably wasn't in your vocabulary. But we've sorted that out now. Yay, go us.
I was just informed that people can't hear you. Can you engage? Do you have your speak on in Second Life?
Hang on.
There's a button on the bottom that says speak.
Can people hear me now?
Let's make sure that they can. Jamaki says she's telepathically beaming us just like a vampire. Can people hear her voice? Only
If
on
I'm
YouTube.
speaking now, can people hear me?
You have to press the speak button on the bottom. And then you
Uh,
see little green waves coming out of your head.
okay, hang on.
Little
Where is the speaker button?
The speak
Oh,
button is on the bottom.
yep. I'm not seeing the green waves.
It's a mic button. It's brown. Oh, it's brown, not gray.
Um, I'm not seeing this mic. That mic button. That
There's a
mic button there.
Yep, the mic button that we had on. Can people
Yeah.
hear her? Oh, yes, people can hear her. Wonderful. Now, let me
What
ask you about
was that? Absolute silence to everyone in the room. Could they not hear me
yes,
speaking?
yeah. They,
Should
well,
we?
they can go back to the YouTube, but basically, I mean, if you want to summarize why the book works, and this is interesting because I'm so proud of myself that I made an artist actually be her own marketer, which is very hard. It is really hard to pitch your own stuff. We talk about this often. It's something that artists have a hard time, but I think to some extent they need to learn it. So in 15 seconds, why does your book appeal to people who would normally want to burn all Nora Roberts or whatever her name is? I don't want to be against Nora Roberts. She just came to mind. She's a
I
romance
mean,
writer.
I also want to burn many romance novels, and I think the whole happily ever after genre is just hugely overplayed, and it always ends when the real story begins. I think my book would appeal to people who are sick of romance because my heroine's sick of romance as well, and
Right.
she's never going to find true love the way she's running her life. So there is romance in there, but it's quite snarky. Um, and it's a very cross-genre book. It's horror. It's a whodunit. There's a mystery, a murder mystery tucked in there that gets solved through the course of the book. And I'm a huge graphic novel fan, and I wanted to bring the feel of the graphic novels that I love to read to a written book. And so when I was trying to write it, I wanted it to be very, very visual. So I think people who are not so much into romance, but who like light horror, who like stuff that's quite funny, and who can put up with pages after pages of shagging, I think they'll probably like this book.
Right. Let's repeat the shagging part. But no, but
You went back to shagging.
the I mean, I imagine this to be actually to get the tone right between all these different things. I mean, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of zombie action. I mean, again, like I said earlier, it's pretty violent too. I didn't expect that actually, um,
It is
but
quite it
you
is
could
quite interesting. I never thought I would be writing such gory books. And when I started this, I hadn't read horror for quite a few years. I read masses and masses of horror when I was a teenager. I'm a huge Stephen King fan. But then I kind of drifted away from it. So even I was surprised when I started writing this book just how many heads were getting ripped off and just how much
heads are
blood was
getting
going.
absolutely the
Yeah,
blood is spurting out of
it
the
truly
headless.
is.
Why did you? Oh, this is interesting. Why did you not? Because I'm the same way. I was consuming horror in all different forms, and then I stopped doing it. And my own sort of reflection is honestly that the world is so horrific. And when I got more interested in a very granular way with what was going on and also the history and why things are the way they are, I I just could not enjoy horror that much.
I
Do you think of a specific reason why you drifted away from horror into other genres or
I think it's the same thing, really, that when you start, I mean, when you're a teenager, you have no interest in the news whatsoever. And you can't understand why your parents and grandparents are watching the news 24/7 because it's so boring. And then as I started watching the news myself, I equally couldn't understand why people were glued to the news because it was so depressing. So I think, like you, I moved away from horror because I wanted relief from the reality of the world, which has honestly been quite depressing in the last few years. So it's very jokey horror. This is not gritty horror. This is not Stephen King makes it hard for you to go to sleep at night horror. It's
Mhm.
quite lightweight. And yes, there is a lot of gore in there, but I think that it's not sort of visceral gore. It's more, I don't know, possibly sort of Japanese video game gore. Um,
Aha.
when I was writing it, I'd been writing the book for about 2 weeks, and I was having dinner with my friends, and I looked up from my plate, and I was like, if you ripped someone's head off, would the blood spray out? And if it did, how long would it spray out for, and how far would it go? And there was this disgusted silence at the dinner table, and I was like, "Oh, forget. We can talk about this later, or not, or not." I mean, it does kind of engross you when you're writing these kind of things.
No, I mean you got to do this research. Absolutely. No,
And
I
there
understand.
there's a scene in the book with a nail gun, and I really wanted to write the scene with the nail gun, but I'd never actually used a nail gun, so I had to go and buy a nail gun. And I actually would like to say that it's one of the most useful purchases that I have ever made. Everyone should have a nail gun.
The nail gun, I don't know, maybe oh no, you're not reading that one, but that's an awesome scene too. Um, I want to read a brief excerpt here that has the word shagging in it. This is right in the beginning. Since we're talking about it, this is a little excerpt here where the the hero of the book, Tony Windsor. She's in her late 20s. She's a real estate agent by day, and she's raising the dead by night. She's a necromancer. We'll find out what that is. And so she's doing this in a very compulsive um, way since a very early age, going to the cemetery and bringing out the dead, and then putting them back to sleep. Um, and yeah, and she's a real estate agent by day. Her boss is Bernie, and Bernie is kind of annoying. And here she talks about Bernie. She says, I didn't hate Bernie, and he wasn't actually the worst boss in the world. But our relationship had soured at the Christmas party when he was newly single, having split up with my friend Helen, and I was newly drunk, having consumed 2 bottles of champagne on an empty stomach. We had spent one of those hideously memorable nights together that both parties would rather forget, which hit a low point after some sub average shagging when he suggested I should spank him, lacking the sobriety needed for a really cutting response. I threw up on him instead. This is just wonderful writing. Everybody has a story like this. Oops, sorry, maybe not. Only me and you. Uh,
It's
um,
just us, Drax. It's just us.
damn it! I wanted to connect with the audience, but no, this is really a lot of fun, and there's also action, like I said, romance, action. Now, you, I don't know if you still live there because this whole thing plays in the countryside in
Ah,
England, right? And is there something about this? Is it important where it plays, that it plays in that countryside
so,
setting?
so every single place in the book is real. She lives in a little village called Colton. Colton is a real village, and I lived there until I was 11 years old. The
Hmm.
only bit of Colton I've made up is the church, which isn't there. Even the bridge at the bottom of the village is a real bridge. She goes to various towns. She goes to Rugeley, and she goes to Stafford, and those are the towns where my parents used to go shopping when I was a little girl. She goes to a little village called Salt. There is a little village called Salt. It's adorable. So I set this book literally in the towns and villages where I grew up. One or two of the buildings I invented, but the market square is real. I don't think there's a morgue in Stafford actually anymore. I think the bodies go to Birmingham and up to Stoke, but pretty much everywhere else in there is real. And I wrote it because I thought I'm so familiar with this place. Hopefully it will feel real because it is real, and I won't be trying to invent somewhere and give it depth. It already has depth. So obviously, when my Netflix adaptation happens and these Staffordshire tours take place, people will be able to, go and see Tony's haunts.
I actually brought up a slide here in the back because we do research. Shyla here also does a lot of research. She put this slide together of
Oh my
some
goodness.
wonderful views here of Staffordshire, as you guys pronounce it, I guess. And the castle here in the upper right-hand corner, because your book again, Tony Windsor, the real estate agent. This is
Oh my
totally random.
goodness.
This castle is on the market for £5 million. So pretty good. Uh,
Amazing.
Oh, Deborah in the audience says if the story has shagging in it, Netflix will fight to adapt it. Yeah, we'll have
Yay.
to have a talk with Netflix about the shagging part. Um, yeah, and oh, wait a minute. And Staffordshire, your town here, is actually one of the 10 happiest towns in Britain.
Really?
Did you know that? Yeah, yeah. You
I
can
did
find
not
this
know that.
information online. This is
That's
what we do here in
interesting.
the Second Life Book Club, Alice. We do our homework. We know more than the guest knows.
There are quite a lot of castles in Staffordshire, but most of them are falling to pieces. We
Oh
do an
God,
excellent line in tumble down real estate.
you are. I don't know if you told me this or if it's on your bio, um, that you call yourself a lefty feminist or something like that.
I think I said that my Twitter handle
Oh,
um, woke libtard feminist snowflake.
that is pretty good. But seriously, what your character Tony is awesome in the book. I really like her. But what is interesting also, and I'm not, I mean, these vampires. She falls in love with this vampire. The boss, I mean, he is a little. There's some questionable behavior with him a little bit, but his boss is really kind of an a-hole too, and she is, she's pushing back at this kind of stuff. I think you did a great job depicting someone who is very much attracted to someone else who has some flaws. And by someone, I mean a female attracted to a male who has some typical male traits
Yes.
of obnoxiousness. Again, I'm also a male, of course, but I'm also a feminist, and I've been married for quite some time, and I was whipped into shape, and I think, better for it, I guess, the world possibly too. But how would you say Tony is? I mean, it seems to me that that was an important part of this character because she is in problematic relationships before, and these vampires are not. I mean, they're problematic.
I think she's stuck in the middle of being a girl from a generation where you want to live happily ever after
Ah,
and a girl who wants um, her own agency and who wants to be respected. So on the one hand, she's kind of expected to find a handsome man and fall in love with him. So she's trying to do that. But on the other hand, all the handsome men in the book are absolute jerks. At the closest
mhm.
she gets to a nice guy, she has to raise from the dead herself.
That
You
is
know,
true. Yes.
Benedict's a jerk. She ends up dating Oscar, who's an absolute jerk. She's been shagging her boss, who's pretty jerky also, and then there's her
Well, only
ex-boyfriend,
when
who's
she's
not only
drunk.
a jerk but in jail. So, the closest she gets to a nice guy, apart from her brother and her brother's boyfriend, the closest she gets to a nice guy, she has to raise from the dead herself. So, I hope I'm not too negative on the male sex in the book.
It,
I mean, there are
no,
some
no,
good guys in
absolutely
there.
not. But now I'm asking you: is this a kind of a veiled biography, autobiography?
Um,
Did you
I,
have
I
to raise someone from the dead to get someone decent in your own life?
Yeah, it was very complicated because when I started, I wasn't the best necromancer in the world. I don't know. I think that there are shades of all my ex-boyfriends in that book. Hopefully, not enough to identify them, but yeah, I think they're all in there.
They will come after you. Oh, we have Stranger Nightfire here coming up on stage. He's we have hecklers on stage. No, Stranger is a regular, but he's landing here on the stage. Stranger, there is a seat with your name on it. Thanks for coming. If you're just tuning in, this is the Second Life Book Club with Alice James, and her debut novel is Grave Secrets. On the YouTubes, we are welcoming people from Chicago. We welcome Kitten Duo. We welcome Roxy. Kitten, thank you as always for being actually a part of the Draxtor YouTube channel. We really appreciate this. And what was I going to say? Yes, please ask questions, and then I'll monitor here the YouTube chat. These people from Chicago might actually be vampires because there are bad vampires in your book and there are good vampires, and we'll get to a to you reading it, which I'm looking forward. But before you read, I want to read one little excerpt that I prepared. Here is Zombies versus Vampires to give people a little bit of a taste of the action. And this is where a nice little lady, um, Mrs. Amelia Scott Martin, was just killed by vampires. But then, of course, Tony resurrects her, brings her back, and figures out, hey, wait a minute, I have this whole army at my disposal to actually get rid of the vampires. And here is the little excerpt. Amelia Scott Martin, I summon you, I said clearly and quietly. She rose neatly to her feet. Her hair was kind of flat on one side, and whatever blood the vampires had left her had pooled in her face to make one side livid and red. I looked at Amelia a little sadly. She would never bake cupcakes again, but at least she could get a fair whack at post-mortem vengeance. Kill him, Amelia, I commanded. I order you to kill him. Yes, dear, she said rather uninterestedly. Do you have anything to eat? This is just awesome, Alice. So the zombies are always hungry too. Yeah.
It's traditional. You can't have zombies that aren't ravenous. That would be wrong.
Did you have to do a lot of research with the zombies and that to not like, I don't know, violate any tropes, genre conventions, or do
I
you
think that
care?
I think that people pay far too much attention to genre expectations because everyone who writes a story about um, anything paranormal has to make up some of it, and it's like
Right.
so people are like, is it vampires or werewolves that can't tolerate silver? And it's like, well, it doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. You know, every book with aliens in it has different aliens. So my vampires are a bit different from everyone else's vampires, and my zombies are a bit different from everyone else's zombies. The way they come up from the dead, and the way they go back, and the talents they have and that they don't have. Um, I mean, I've read. You can probably guess. I've read a lot of zombie books. I have a lot of skulls in my house. My Christmas tree is decorated with crystal skulls. I do have this zombie thing going on, and I think it's. I think my friends are really quite bored of it. But I wanted when I was writing this, I don't I'd never intended to write a zombie book. I actually went to one of those reminded bookshops where you can get 3 books for £5, and I couldn't find a third book. And there was a book of short stories about zombies, so I bought it and I took it home and I read it and I finished it, and I felt that none of these short stories had really been about the zombies. They were all about people getting killed by zombies. So I was like, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to write a book about the zombies. And so that's where I got the idea of very much having um, people like Breeden and Dead Amelia and the other dead people actually be important characters. So the idea that's generally popular in zombie stories where they are just mindless. There's nothing in there except sort of hunger and fierce greed and killing power. I thought I wanted to change that. So yeah, they're definitely different from your normal run of the mill zombie. I hope it's fun. I mean, I had a lot of fun doing it.
And this is really interesting that you said like everybody has to make up their own stuff. And then I was just thinking we live in an interesting world. And I don't know if this is very new, but I think it's also because of the accessibility of content. That's a word I hate, but I'll say it anyway. Content creators and their fans, where there is the super fan that will um, get very obsessed. And I understand it. I'm not trying to make fun of these folks. That's what a nerd is to some extent. Um, Critique people at the very highest level, makers of Star Wars, let's say, or other people, where
Mm.
they would say, "Well, you did this wrong because this happened." I mean, people who have basically the whole character Bible in their head, and then kind of complain to the movie makers or to the writers that they did not get something um, quite right. You did something really cool in your book. Actually, I don't want to give it away, but there is when Tony wants to kind of deal with the vampire problem, she is doing research in the story how to kill a vampire, and then she finds a way, and there's other ways that are sort of traditional, and she finds out that some of them actually don't work. So I guess that's also maybe your little I don't know stab at the people who are too obsessed with genre conventions. I
I
guess.
think it's very easy to get completely obsessed about books and TV series and films and graphic novels that you love. I think I'm as guilty as anyone.
Yeah, you
And I,
mentioned that earlier. You didn't watch the news while I was already engaged. We're both the same age. Let's give it away.
mm.
I was at the, I was marching with the young socialists in Germany while you were watching zombie movies.
No, it's true though that when I wrote that scene you're talking about, I was kind of creating my own internally consistent kind of paranormal physics.
Hmm.
So now really I'm going to have to stick to that, aren't I? In future books, I've got that checklist.
Hmm.
When she goes back, I've already said what can and can't damage and kill a vampire. So it would be very easy for an obsessed fan to trip me up. Not that I think I have any fans or any obsessed fans, but
It will
now that I've
happen.
laid it, but
It
I've
will
laid it
happen.
out there. It's almost a reference list for me. And I did find, because I've written some of the sequels, as you know, I did find in one that I was going back there and thinking, that's such a good idea. I'm going to use that in this book. I threw it in as a throwaway line, but I'm going to use it now.
See, that's a throwaway line that I think is very important. Now, I have read already excerpts, but we want to hear you, so I will
Oh my
ask you
goodness.
to slowly stand up. This is we love this. Don't worry if you fall off the stage. Good thing is we don't have a stage today. You just fall into a grave. And the book display, please magically appear. There it appears. And
Okay.
while Alice is getting ready, I would like if the camera can maybe zoom out a little bit and show us a little bit the surroundings. We are, of course, in a graveyard, given the subject matter of this book. There are some zombies here on the side, and you also see illustrations from the book. Really, really awesome illustrations. The cover is also really great. The whole design. But Ruby, who designed this set here, the graveyard, put these illustrations that had every chapter. Um, they are scattered here around,
I,
and
I,
they're
I,
really
I
nice.
asked I asked for these, and I was so lucky because they had a wonderful graphic novel artist at Rebellion, and she was quite keen. And I said I wanted them to feel like if you riffled through the edge of the book, they would make a moving picture, but they would just
Hmm.
be at the beginning of the chapter. And I love it that some people said I was about chapter 4 when I realised the pictures were changing, and
The pictures change; they
yeah,
progress
just
exactly. So
adorable.
it's really really awesome, and kudos to you because what I understand a little as a reader, we're learning here a lot of stuff as we're readers and not publishing industry professionals. But what I learned over the shows now this past year and a half is that most authors, including really uh, well-known, successful authors, have literally no, or very little say in the cover design, which I find really that would depress me if if then
I,
I
I
see it in the bookshelf in the store and I hate the cover.
I was really lucky because Rebellion is a graphic novel house, really, first and foremost. And I was really excited about that. And then when they started sending the covers to me, I literally didn't like any of them.
Hmm.
And I ended up phoning my agent and was going, they're not gothic enough. And he was like, "Don't worry, Alice, I'll sort it." And then they sent me back a cover which was almost exactly this cover here, and we just really had to tweak it because it wasn't the right car. It needed to be a Morris, and the Morris has these adorable little side mirrors, wing mirrors, and they're very, very distinctive. And as you can see, they're perfect on the cover.
It is
Um,
perfect.
yeah. And Gemma, who did the inside illustrations, she's a very talented graphic novel artist in her own right. And she just took my little wish list and ran with it. And she actually did the very last illustration of the book, which I think you've put up some. You've put up. It's the one
Yep,
with the pussycat sitting by the stove.
that's right
She she
behind you there. Yeah,
she did
yeah.
that one just as a present for me, and that went on the acknowledgements page. So it was lovely. A lovely process doing the cover and the illustrations for this book. And I even asked for the little skull over my name on the front. So where the author's name is at the bottom, instead of the I in Alice, they've got a little skull dotting the I.
Damn, that's like for I
Isn't that
mean for
cute? I just
oh
love that.
yeah,
But yeah,
for an ex goth like yourself, this is heaven.
Absolutely. So yeah, I was so pleased with that.
Real
Right.
quick before you read, can you adjust the mic a little bit? It
Yep,
might have slipped down a little bit.
it probably has. Do you want me to move it back up?
Yeah, move it to the position we tested. That it sounds really good.
Drax, is that better?
Yep, perfect.
Right. Okay.
And now
Okay.
let's get going. You start right from the beginning, so
I've
there's
got
no
it.
real
Yeah.
setup.
Yeah.
Tony is, of course, here, and she's at the cemetery, and we'll get introduced
Okay.
to possibly the most well-adjusted male in the entire story, and he happens to be been under the
Happens to be
ground for
dead.
a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah. That very night, I planned to raise Breeden Havers from the dead. He was the oldest corpse in the cemetery, and I've always liked a challenge. I knelt in the damp grass of the graveyard and sprinkled a generous circle of salt around the headstone. A wide margin is crucial. Tree roots and moles move things around, and it's always disappointing when your zombie comes up missing a limb or a head. I really hate that. Me, Lavington Windsor, estate agent by day, necromancer by night. I've never found a way of making my hobby pay, alas. There isn't much demand for mouldering corpses in the corporate world. And while poking around people's homes isn't as much fun as raising the dead, it's an okay way to make a living. Professional necromancer, though. I'd certainly like that on my passport. I sealed the circle with a perfume atomizer, spraying over the white line until it was damp. My grandfather used stout in a plant mister, but Robert Windsor lived in a time when no one raised an eyebrow if you travelled with an emergency beer supply. If I ever got caught out, I'd be packing Chanel. I added a few drops of blood, even though I probably didn't need them. Practice makes perfect, they say, and I'd done this almost every day since I turned 8. I have to. It's a compulsion, and I don't think I'll ever be free of it. But then, I'd never raised a man who died more than 2.5 centuries before. I'd summoned every other corpse in the graveyard, 423 of them to be exact. Breeden would be the last, and by far the oldest, so this warm August night marked a rather special occasion. I had my pin ready, just in case. They started burying people here about 300 years ago, and stopped shortly after the Second World War. Many of the names on the tombstones read like a roster of unlikely film stars: John Dew, Ashby Raincourt, Bailey Culpepper. No matter, old and new, I'd raised them all, or nearly all. I stepped out of the circle, taking care not to disturb the moist salt, and opened my rucksack. I'd packed 4 family-sized packets of crisps and an entire loaf of white sliced bread into ham sandwiches. Take it from me, a raised zombie is a hungry zombie. I opened the crisp packets and poured them onto paper plates, then arrayed them inside the circle, adding a final one with a teetering pile of sandwiches in it. Good to go, Tony. No eye of newt, no toe of frog. People yearning for arcane ceremonies with candles and entrails would be disappointed by the real thing, because I'd never needed to sacrifice so much as a wasp. Salt, perfume, snacks, occasionally a drop of blood, and end of story. That's all I've ever needed. I suppose I'm just a natural. Breeden Havers, in peace I call you. I summon you this night. Come to me. The words weren't necessary, but they gave me a little oomph, probably not a million miles from a weightlifter grunting as they hefted the bar. Words or not, Breeden Havers came. He stepped out of the earth with a firm stride, nothing tentative about him, and looked around with a watchful air. I could have cheered. He was beautifully intact, not a digit missing, not a mouldering limb in sight. My first thought was how perfect he was for a zombie, and my second just how tall he must have been amongst my short English ancestors back in the 1750s. He had curly dark hair, big brown eyes, and a cheerful smile. He was wearing some kind of wide trousers and a long coat embroidered with peacocks. Sometimes, when I summon, there's nothing in there. No soul, just a body, compliant but empty. I let them go straight away. Nature abhors a vacuum, they say, but demons love one, and a nice unoccupied body walking about, that would be irresistible. Mostly there's at least a wisp of character left, but not one of my resurrected corpses had strode into the world like they were ready to ask for my vote. I beamed at Breeden. Hi, I'm Lavington. He looked just a tad taken aback and bowed very slightly. Havers, Breeden Havers. Delighted to make your acquaintance, Mistress Lavington. His voice was a pleasing baritone, and his English accent could have cut glass. He was in perfect nick, as though he hadn't spent 3 minutes in a mouldering tomb, let alone 3 centuries. Such a shame I couldn't show him off to the world. I wanted to ask him to show me his hands, to check each and every cuticle. But that might have been rude, so I just beamed a bit more. So, you're a necromancer, Breeden said. Startled, I nodded. Since I was a little girl. How did you know? I'm a man of intelligence, dear lady. I died, yet here I stand in a graveyard with you. He gestured around the moonlit hill. It seems the obvious deduction. 10 out of 10, Sherlock, I said. He looked confused, and I found myself wondering how long ago the detective books had been penned. Clearly, after Breeden had shuffled off this mortal coil. No, not shuffled. Breeden clearly wasn't a shuffler. Believe me, I've raised a lot of zombies. There's nothing I don't know about shuffling.
And that's Alice James reading from Grave Secrets. Big round of applause. Just hilariously awesome how this starts. And she's summoning Breeden. You can take back your seat, Alice. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of research here. So, necromancy, as I found out, was actually very popular in the UK between 1500 and 1700. So this is partially also an educational program, as people know. So here's a slide with a crazy illustration here by Edward Kelly. And on Wikipedia, it says necromancy is the practice of magic or black magic involving communication with the dead, either by summoning their spirits as apparitions, visions, or raising them bodily for the purpose of divination, imparting the means to foretell future events, discover hidden knowledge, to bring someone back from the dead, or to use the dead as a weapon. Sometimes
Ah,
referred to as death magic, the term may also sometimes be used in a more general sense to refer to black magic or witchcraft. And here's the craziest thing, Alice. So I'm going down a rabbit hole looking this up, and I found a website by a guy uh, uh, with the name Alexander Cummings, who is
uh
a
huh.
necromancer, and he is from the Midlands.
Oh my
It
goodness.
says on his website, but he's in Brooklyn now, so I guess they're all going over there. But yeah, he's offering services in
Right.
that regard. So
Maybe I'll set myself up in competition.
but I wonder if you, when you looked into sort of also like I mean, the real practices of, I don't know,
Um,
necromancy, that kind of stuff, did you come across weird stuff like that, or people
well,
who are actually engaged in
well,
this?
there is a very famous guy called Alexander Crawley, and he
Oh yeah.
used to hold his satanic masses in a place called the Hellfire Caves. The Hellfire Caves are about 40 minutes from here, and I have visited them, and they are incredibly spooky. They're literally carved in the side of a hill. You just walk into this fake cave, and these dark corridors just lead away, and they have these chambers in them, and this place where they've dug below the water level, so there's like a fake lake you can go across on a little boat. And they have no practical use. There's absolutely nothing to be done with these caves. They are just there for dubious practices. Um,
Wow.
I know, which is just fascinating.
Okay,
And
that means I have to bring up again, just to remind people, the collage of Staffordshire. What is up with these idyllic landscapes and these types of practices? I don't know.
well, Staffordshire is actually one of a very, very beautiful bit of agricultural land um, in the UK, and it has really beautiful clay soil, which is why we have lots and lots of potteries and something like the highest density of breweries in Europe, because the clay soil was really, really beautiful for filtering beer.
Hmm.
So yeah,
And
I
you,
think that the main point thing is in Staffordshire, everyone was just
yeah, you get
absolutely
drunk
drunk
and then you
all the
raise the
time,
dead. Yeah, sure.
and drinking out of really beautiful flagons. So yeah, there you go.
In your book, there's the Heidelberg Accord in Germany. In the story, they have passed laws to bring vampires out into the open, basically not discriminate against them.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning, it was interesting because I said, "Ah, is this sort of a metaphor for refugees?" Because then there's also or foreigners, broadly speaking, come into the country because there's also the English or England Defense League, right, or Defenders League that are sabotaging and going after vampires. So,
Yeah.
but
There's definitely a bit of my woke libtard snowflake coming to the
yeah,
surface
but some of
there.
them are bad too, Alice. You're putting water on the mills of the Brexit guys because they will read this book and go like, look, if you let them all in, that's not good. You let the bad kind in.
Yeah, you know, never gonna find a basket that doesn't have one or two bad eggs in it. The point is, as far as I can see, most of the bad eggs are here already.
I agree with that. Not having been in the UK for quite some time, but
They're here and they're in Parliament.
yeah. Okay, let's stay with escapism, shall we? We don't like to talk about the news. Um, where was I? Okay, so before we go to the next readings, I also want to say that this book, Alice, what is really also cool is sort of the vibe. Again, we're the same age, and I really don't feel, frankly, I feel like I'm 16 inside. I don't know. My wife says I behave like a 12-year-old, but
I get
whatever.
that a
This
lot.
lies in the eyes of the beholder. But what the book really does, I think, also the vibe of sort of these romantic trials and tribulations of a younger person trying to find true love and balancing, passion, in this case, raising the dead with a day job. So all this kind of stuff, all these vibes are really, really richly painted. And again, it's an awesome book. I should give a big shout out to Rebellion sending over a physical copy because I'm a bit of a snob reading from physical copies. Speaking about physical copies, now, Alice, I have a question before we go to the next reading. Now, I watch YouTube videos and I get a YouTube ad of a woman from New Zealand who says this is an ad for her um, course that shows you how to make ten to $20,000 a month from books without writing them. Okay. So this woman is actually, and this is for everyone in the audience as well. Let me know if you came across this ad. So I obviously did not click or go to her course, but the point here is I get this ad multiple times a day, and she talks about selling ebooks on Amazon with a 70% margin or something like that. And she proudly looks into the camera and says, I have no aspiration of being an author, yet I make $20,000 a month selling books. It is the ad is absurd but it's also really offensive. So I don't know if you, Alice, with your author friends, when you talk about like this kind of stuff, I mean, I find it ludicrous and reprehensible. um but this stuff exists apparently. So I don't know. She says, I have the secret and there's not a lot of competition. Buy my course and I will let you know. I have not written any of these books yet. They're selling like hotcakes. So I don't know what how this works. Maybe there's some AI
I
thing or something. I don't know.
I've not seen this wonderful New Zealand woman. I have no idea how she's making this money or if she's making any money. I know that the very successful authors, make a lot of money, and a lot of people write books and they put them out there, and they very bravely put them out there on, say, Amazon Kindle, and they don't sell any copies.
Yeah.
And
This is the reality that I
yeah,
hear all the time
yeah.
because it's so saturated and
Mm. I
yeah.
mean, I felt that unlike this wonderful lady from New Zealand, I can write, and I've always worked as a writer. I don't think I'm someone who wants to market themselves. I don't want to be an expert in the world of publishing, and I don't want to learn all about the financing of royalties. I'd really rather just write books. And
Hmm.
that's why, when I finished the book, I didn't go down the self publishing route. I sat back and tried to find myself an agent because I didn't want to do any of that stuff. I don't think I'd be any good at it. And I was really lucky. I mean, if I look back on past me, I'm like, that's never going to work because I wrote to a guy called Simon Kavanagh from the Mick Cheetham Agency, and he and Mick Cheetham represented some of my absolute favourite authors, like China Mayville and the
Oh.
wonderful Ian Banks. And what they didn't do was represent any books like mine. But because I was young and foolish and stupid, and I didn't think about that, I sent Simon my book, and I was like, I love all your authors, so maybe you'll love my book. And amazingly, he rang me back. He's like, yep, I love your book. So he doesn't really have anyone else like me on his roster of authors. They're all very amazing science, mostly very amazing science fiction authors like Pat Gadigan and John M. Harrison. I'm John Harrison, sorry. And you know they're not. There I am, little Alice, who's written this book about zombies and shagging, and he's like, nope, I love this book. Let's make it happen. And so that was wonderful. And then he found me Rebellion, who, as a graphic novel house, were like I felt a perfect fit for me. And I'm sure that there are people. I mean, I know there are people. Um, the guy who wrote Wool, who just publish their books themselves. They make them bestsellers, and they're amazing. And I don't know how they do it. I don't think I could do it. I'm so happy to have someone else to do the marketing, try and get the reviews, design my beautiful covers. Um, so I think people like me are always going to look at your lovely lady from New Zealand and go, yeah, can I run a mile? Can I run 2 miles? Could I maybe run three?
Mm.
It's not the sort of thing I would ever want to try and do. Just
Absolutely. I find no, I mean, this is really wonderful, your story that you just shared with us. Also, I think the moral here is, and I'm glad because I felt conflicted. Should I even talk about this ad? But it sparks a little, talking about what do I really want to do. This is what I hear from you. I want to be a writer. I really want to be proud of what I put out there. Versus this lady wants to look at the spreadsheets and wants to see the money coming in no matter what. I mean, there is fundamentally, and this is sort of on a holistic level, I think, a really important thing that every person has to figure out what do they want to do, what really drives them. Some people are driven by the bank account, looking at the bank account numbers every 2 minutes and going it up and down, and other people are proud, and sometimes there's an overlap, uh, but I would also look at myself at the latter. I want to give something to people that hopefully they enjoy and that I'm proud of. Of course, a banker would now say, "Well, I'm proud of my bank account." But anyways, you know what I'm saying. But what you're also saying is here, I guess, don't be afraid to approach your heroes with asking them, "Here is my
yeah,
work. Can you take a look at it?" Because a lot of people say, "Nah, don't do it," because they'll reject it anyway.
it was very much a case of approaching one of my heroes, and I think if I'd been more experienced in the publishing world, I would never have had the nerve to do it. So sometimes there is a virtue in just wandering into something blind with lots of hope and self confidence. Um,
Could not agree more.
yeah,
I absolutely agree. I think the little you actually, this is very important point you're making. Sometimes the lack of knowledge in a specific process, or the knowledge how the process is supposed to work in whatever industry that is, the fact that you don't know these intricacies can be an enormous asset in moving up the ladder quickly, or into this little thing.
mm,
Yep. Yep.
definitely.
Same is true for a lot of other places. Okay, Ruby here says in regards to this ad, there's people selling pirated fake books and Wikipedia entries as fake books as well on Amazon, and that advert seems to nudge wink at those sellers. Uh-huh. And Stranger says she's making money by conning people to uh which with get rich quick schemes. That's obviously the angle, because what you buy from her is a course to learn how what she does. Stranger says in the local chat, I knew a guy who sent his first ever poetry submission to the New Yorker. How absurd you might think, but it was accepted.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. Now, um, let's do another reading.
Okay. Right. So I chose for
You have to
I
stand up again.
I do, don't
Yeah, I'm
I?
sorry. This is really, I know this is so horrible. Zoom is so much better, but there's no graveyard. And there's no
Oh
book
no.
display rising out of the grave like a
Oh, hang
zombie.
on.
It's like a zombie book display.
Yes, I can do this. I can do this.
You
I
can
can do
stand there,
this.
right? The zombie book display will come to you.
No, no, I can do this. Look at me. I'm
Oh,
lurching around here like a professional.
oh yes. Look at this. Big
Right.
round of applause for Alice. She's a mortal who can move, dance around the
Right.
graveyard. So now we're
Okay.
reading an action sequence with a little bit of violence. Tony is hanging out with Breeden, who she raised from the dead. And what is interesting that turns out that Breeden can retain his memory, and she's kind of starting a little friendship with him.
Yep. So I'm reading this bit, and just to lead into it, she's come home and it's late at night, and she's worried that some bad guys who attacked her before have been waiting for her. So she's brought her zombie with her to protect her. Okay. As we rounded the corner and my porch came into view, I saw a figure on the opposite side of the road, partially hidden by the bus stop. And yes, he was wearing a balaclava. Next time there was a work party, I was going to lock the door, take the phone off the hook, and watch all three Lords of the Rings movies with a kebab, an entire tub of ice cream, and a bottle of vodka. If there was any evening left, I would start on The Hobbit. Is that your enemy? Breeden whispered. One of them, I whispered back. I took up my phone to call the police and realized with horror that the battery had died. Oh, this is so unfair. Damn it, Breeden. I think we'll have to make a run for the house so I can call the police. I'm more than equal to two assailants, he assured me. Okay, that's my porch there. I took off my shoes. I can't run very fast in this dress, and I'll have to unlock the door when we get there, so I'm pretty sure they'll catch up with me. If you can just fend them off for long enough, then I can get to the phone. Have no fear. Let's go. We did quite well. The thug by the bus stop had lost interest hours ago and didn't even see us until we were within moments of the porch. But as luck would have it, that was exactly where thug number 2 was hanging out. Even as I bounded up the steps to the door, he barreled into my already bruised ribs, and I went flying. There was a sound of expensive gold fabric tearing, and I think I smacked into the wall and then maybe all of the stairs at least twice each before I tumbled heavily onto my arse. I looked up, dazed. My attacker wasn't wearing a balaclava. Instead, he was sporting a splendid crusty black eye, the sort you might get if a small, terrified estate agent whacked you in the face with a rock. He smiled, revealing a couple of decades of poor dental hygiene and a disregard for flossing. Perhaps blinded by the porch light, he did not seem to have noticed that I was not alone this time. Got you now, he said, and took something large, long, and shiny out of his belt. Leave her alone, Breeden said, stepping in between us. Breeden, careful, he's armed, I called. But too late. He stabbed Breeden 3, 4, 5 times through the torso. The final thrust was so vicious I saw the blade emerge from the back of Breeden's shirt. I stared in horror, unable even to scream. Breeden, on the other hand, didn't appear to notice. I said, leave her alone, he said, and reaching forward, he seized the man on each side of his face. What sort of low creature attacks a woman? He asked in disgust, and with the most casual of twists, he tore my attacker's head off and hurled it onto the lawn. Yep, that's what he did. There are about 7 pints of blood in a human body, they say. At least 6 of them hit me full on, along with a couple of vertebrae and the odd chunk of neck. I gazed in revulsion at the top of a torso which lay sprawled on my lawn. Breeden seemed as surprised as me, and we both gaped in silence for some time. Across the road, a car engine started up, and a vehicle drove up at top speed. The sort of speed you would drive away at if you'd just seen a man have his head clean ripped off. I didn't blame him at all. I do apologise, Mistress Tony, said Breeden. I was worried about you. I looked at him. He was blood spattered too, and the hilt of a bowie knife was protruding from the centre of his chest. The hydrangea was covered in something I would broadly term viscera. Um, don't worry about that. Oh, arse, this is awful. What am I going to do with this body? I could eat it, suggested Breeden. Please tell me I heard that wrong. Did you really just offer to eat it? Well, to be honest, it smells rather good. And it's been a while since we finished those marvellous little snacks you brought me. He looked a little dazed and licked some blood off his hand in a rather embarrassed way. Hungry zombie, no circle of power, corpses springing up around me. This was exactly the kind of irresponsible behaviour my grandfather had warned me about.
And that is Grave Secrets here with Alice James on the Second Life Book Club. And here you get a feeling of, again, Breeden and what zombies can do, helping, getting rid of bad guys, vampires or otherwise. And also, we forgot to mention that the necromancer business or hobby um, started kind of early in Tony's family. Now, you mentioned earlier that you are a writer, so you have a day job as a writer, yes?
Yes, I do.
But what kind of writing is that? Is that more sort of technical or
Oh, so anything I get paid for, I'm not proud. I was a financial journalist for about 10 years, 12 years, 13 years. I worked for Bloomberg for about half of that, and then I was a freelance writer, and I just
Ellis,
worked
you
for,
don't have to be ashamed because
yeah.
just before you came on the show, the New York Times released a piece about a Second Life type virtual world and pretended that it just started yesterday and people got married. And the article is so badly written and it's in the New York Times. I cannot imagine that somebody with your skill would
I
have
would have
ever
written a
written
good
something that
one. I would have
absolutely.
written a good one. I mean, I then moved into more sort of fun writing. I was a travel writer up until COVID happened. But travel writing hasn't really thrived for um, us on the continent. So I work at the moment for a French university in their research department. And yeah, so yeah, I've written everything.
What I find interesting, and the reason I'm asking is, um, that you then enjoy the creative part of writing because it's the same thing from a sort of a um I don't know, writing is writing. Of course, writing a novel and writing short stories and expressing yourself creatively is very, very different. But I always wonder, if I were, let's say, a professional chef, if I wanted to um cook every day at home. I think I would probably order
Mm.
out, or I guess if I were a writer as my day job, maybe I would like to learn the piano instead or something like that. I
I'm
guess the question is it hard? Is it hard to have to basically do the same thing on a physical and sort of on a structural level, but express yourself obviously in the way you really want?
so it's a good question, and I don't know if I'm sure every single writer has a different answer. I mean, I do have other hobbies. I don't only read and write when I've finished work, but I would say that writing is my primary hobby as well as my job.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I do sometimes if I'm in writing mode, I sit up in the morning and the computer's by my bed, and I sort of type for an hour before I'll get a cup of coffee. And when I go on holiday, I do take my computer with me, and I'll probably still write 2,000 words a day.
Hmm.
It is my job, but it is also my hobby. So
See, this is a great answer, and I think everybody has because the question obviously is also if a day job, if making your hobby to your profession, and then I mean it gets the potential is there to get the fun beaten out of it.
I mean, I would say that for the university, I do a lot of editing their research, and that's less creative, but that plays into the side of me that's a complete perfectionist. Um, if you're writing a thesis and you want someone to do your references, I'm literally a goddess at references.
Hmm.
I don't know anyone in the world who does better references than me. All those lists of books at the end and publications and citations, that is my superpower. Isn't that depressing?
We'll talk after the show because I need to have a Wikipedia entry written about me. I'm a famous virtual videographer, and as Second Life is trending on Twitter, I think it's time. It's about time to get me out there. Shyla, our researcher, found listened to an interview, and she found this quote from you, which I think is I mean, it's humble. You say here, I'm not someone who naturally has a lot of skills as a writer. I'm great at getting facts down, but if you were to read my prose from a few years ago, it's very, very dry. When I first started to write, trying to write novels, I didn't have a lot of lyrical skill. So, I mean, you're talking about the past, but so the question also is, when do you know, it's time to now? I'm basically ready.
um,
Yeah.
so I don't want to be depressing, but it's definitely when my it's definitely when my mother died. She died about 8 years ago, and I'd always told her that I was going to be a novelist, and she was the reader in our household. She was an absolutely crazy reader. She read all the time. My dad eventually asked if we could just not read books at the table so he could occasionally have some conversation. And she would buy, her thing was science fiction, and she would read them once and then she didn't know what to do with them. So they ended up in tea chests in the shed. So whenever I'd run out of books, I would go to the shed and like dig around in a tea chest. And I always
Mm,
told her I was going to be a novelist, and she died quite suddenly 8 years ago. And I was just like, and I never wrote those books so that she could read them. And I think I started almost the day after she died because I was like, I'm not going to waste any more time. Why didn't I do this
wow.
before now? Um, and I mean, it was nice because I was able to. If you've got a physical copy of the book, you will see it's dedicated to her um,
Yep.
and to Wendy, who's my mum-in-law, who also died quite recently. And so that was the moment where I was like, I can't waste any more time. So I don't
Right.
really know why I didn't do it before then, but I know exactly why I started it then. Um, and yeah, it was. I never really
Wow.
stopped. And when I'm really sort of got a bit of inspiration, I'm quite happy to write 2,000 words a day on top of my day job. So it does get a bit obsessive. But yes, the first few things I wrote were not good. I've got about three half quarter finished books, and they're very poor. Um, they're very very badly
But
written.
again, this is based on your own assessment, or maybe also with some. I guess also my question is always, do you have a an honest friend that you could
So
that is honest enough to say, you know what,
um,
this is kind of shitty because it is a hard thing to do that,
hmm,
obviously, because you want to be encouraging, but you
yeah,
also don't want to encourage delusion.
I have three. I didn't realize that many authors have these trusted friends who read their first drafts for them, and they call them beta readers. I'd never heard the phrase until I joined Twitter. But apparently, I have three beta readers, and one of them, my friend Sheila, is a very talented um, programmer and artist herself, but not a writer, and she is brutal. She's
Mm,
absolutely brutal, and um, she nitpicks everything. She's like, you said on page 23 here that that happened, and then that can't have happened because it says on page 77 here that that happened. They can't both have happened, and she doesn't let me get away with a thing. Um,
mm,
I've got I've got one beta reader, my sister Jessica, she's kinder, but when she doesn't like something, she won't let it drop, and she's back. She's like, "Did you change that yet? Did you change that yet? Did you change that yet? Have you changed that yet?" So yeah, I have three beta readers, and I don't know how I would manage without them. Um,
that
and
is really the key to
yeah,
to nourish, to build that kind of network.
yeah.
uh,
I mean,
I
I asked a lot of people for initial thoughts on my first book, and most people said yes, and then never got back to me. And the three people I asked, who are now, as I say, my beta readers, they got back to me and gave me feedback. And so, yeah, it was. I'm the sort of person as well who said, yes, I'll be your beta reader to other people, but I'm not. I'm not a beta reader. I don't have that skill. I couldn't say anything bad to anybody about their books for a start. I would just bottle it and just say, oh, it's so good, it's lovely. Yeah, you should get it published. I'd be a hopeless beta reader.
You know what? If you need one, that's brutal. Give me a call. I'm German. The German, and I mean, you have some German background, and
I
Germans
do.
also play a role in the book. But
It's true.
Germans, if people ask me what's the difference between Germans and Americans, for example, I would always say, okay, if you come to a German with a really crazy idea about your future or some business plan or some passion or whatever, the German will spend 2 hours explaining why this idea that you just told him will never work and you will die, and then you will die penniless, and you will bring others, drag others with you in the grave. And the American will say, hey, dude, that's awesome. Let's go do it. Let's jump off this bridge together. So I mean, this is a little bit oversimplification, but yeah, the Germans also, I think, see this sort of warning as their duty to again prevent you from jumping off that bridge, while the Americans say, hey, we can invent
That
a
water
new
looks great, splishy
thing.
splashy.
Exactly, and there's fish down there, and then maybe some gold on the bottom. Oh boy. Okay, so let's do our we're gonna roll in, as we have in the past few months. We'll roll in the post-show stream hour into the regular stream, so we'll keep streaming until the bitter end. So we have a little bit time. Um, let's go to our favorite segment here, which is called back to school. So what will now happen? A back to writing school backdrop will magically appear, and if I may ask Alice to basically stand up or just click on the chair on this. Sorry, not on the chair. Sorry, you're the teacher. Alice will now be teaching. Please stand up and stand in front of this desk, and we'll take an audience question or two. So I heard earlier that Shyla wants to ask a question. So Shyla, please sit on this chair, if you will. And Alice, um,
Hang on, I'm
I'm
working on it.
very good. No, no. I'm the principal and the director. Please face the student. The student needs to be faced. No, this is good. Very good. Very good. Now, student Shyla and teacher Alice. Shyla is now in charge of asking a question about writing or publishing or anything that has to do with books. Shyla, are you ready? And then we can get someone else too, whoever wants to.
Hey, Shiloh, what do you want to know? Hit me with it.
Shyla, you're muted on the audio. Please bring up your audio. We cannot hear you, unfortunately.
There we go.
There we go. Now we hear you.
Yeah, so this might seem like an odd question,
Very good.
but
You're a gecko, Shyla.
okay.
Geckos ask odd questions. Sorry, I should shut up.
But you talked about purchasing the nail, the automatic nail, uh, uh, and 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 I'm just
I
wondering
didn't.
how you
I
tested it for research.
Okay, so the automatic
right.
nail gun happens, and you already said that you needed to find out what it does. And I guess, Shyla, the question is, did you murder someone or had someone in the basement chained to a wall and practice the nail gun on that person
Yeah,
for
I hope
research?
this isn't gonna really disappoint people, but I built a compost bin with it.
Oh,
Yeah, I had some pallets, some delivery pallets, and I ripped them apart and I built a compost bin with them with my nail gun. So yeah, no zombies were harmed in the construction of my compost bin, but many mouldering things do moulder inside it.
I actually honestly thought that maybe you bought a piece of meat at the butcher's and just drove nail guns in it and then measured how deep they go in.
Ooh,
Well,
I'm
yeah,
giving you ideas, huh, for the next time you for
ooh.
the sequel. Let's
Hmm.
remind folks this is the first book of a series of books. Am I
Yeah.
right?
Yep. The due to the publishing world moving at a speed that makes snails look um impressive, they have signed the next two books in their series, which is great.
Hmm.
But they're not coming out. They're coming out back to back, so they're coming out together, but they're not coming out for a year.
We will well in the meantime then Netflix can figure out how in their script for the movie or the series version they will deal with the shagging part of stuff. Now, do we have
Absolutely.
another question? So, Shiloh, thank you very much. Please sit back down, says me, the principal of the Second Life School. Do we have another question from the audience? You can sit here. Oh, Ruby has a question. Look at that. Ruby is also an author. She's actually a published author. She has one book out, and she also built the set here. Ruby is now asking the question in text, I believe. So I'm going to translate the text for our audience on YouTube. So Ruby says, hello.
Hey Ruby, thanks for this amazing set. It's absolutely stunning, and I was just blown over by it. And when I said to Drax that I wanted a graveyard to do the book review club in, I didn't expect anything like this. I thought we'd have like a little tombstone, and maybe this is amazing. Thank you.
We go all out. It's your world, your imagination. Now, Ruby, do you have a question other than hello? I'm the principal here, and I brought this amazing author here to to the Second Life Middle School. Um, Here, oh, thank you, says Ruby. So the question is, I also like including some shagging on my stories. Okay,
All the best stories have shagging in.
hold on, she's still typing. Full disclosure, Ruby wrote her book in her native Spanish and translated it herself into English, and I was actually proofreading it. But her English is actually quite exquisite. So here she writes, thank you. The question, I like to include shagging in my stories, and she's still typing here. I think what is the usual response from the readers, and what do the editors and agents say about it? Is it too violent? The shagging.
So when I was writing the book, I had been reading a lot of paranormal romance. And one of the things that I find quite disturbing and quite negative about the paranormal romance genre is that a lot of the sex is very negative. Um, the female characters are forever getting raped and abused to add some touch of seriousness to the books. And there's a lot of sex in the genre, and nobody seems to be enjoying it. So I decided when I wrote Grave Secrets that if there was any sex in the book, all parties indulging were going to be having a good time. So the sex is not violent. The sex is hopefully extremely agreeable. All parties are having a good time, and I'm going to stick to that. I don't mind a bit of head ripping or attacking or decent amounts of gore and murder and vampires killing people and zombies killing people. But I decided I'm not going to have any nasty sex in there because I've read far too much of it.
This is so
So
interesting. I never read paranormal romance ever in my life. I up to about 12 seconds ago, I think I didn't know it existed. So I can imagine. So but you're saying that so then people get raped by ghosts and stuff?
Well, it's just something that the genre seems to have fallen into is that it very
Wow.
often has a female protagonist, and she's often having a perfectly terrible time. And the easy way to give a female protagonist a perfectly terrible time is to subject her to some sexual violence. And I just feel that the
Right.
genre as a whole has gone down that rabbit hole a little bit. And I was not going to go down there. So there's plenty of gore in the book, though, as I say, it's not unnerving gore. It's not the sort of Stephen King gore that makes you cuddle your hot water bottle at night and wish for the sun to come up. It's quite snarky. I think quite quite funny. It's more Shaun of the Dead than The Walking Dead. Um, and yes, there's a lot of shagging, and the sex is all fun. Everyone's having a good time.
I think this is really interesting because I mean, just for shock value to throw something in there. I mean, I have less and less tolerance for this kind of stuff. Again, given the real issues that we're facing in the so-called real world, given that, just to, I mean, it's okay to be. I think anyway, this is a whole different discussion. How transgressive can you
I
be
I
in
just
art and stuff? I don't.
I just
What,
feel
yeah, go ahead.
it's overused.
Yeah.
It's overused. Oh, we got a female protagonist. Let's rape her a bit, and it's just like, oh, for God's sake, this happened in the last four paranormal romance books I read, and I still love the genre, and I still read it all the time, and I think it's so much fun. But that bit of it I've cooled on, and I wasn't gonna go down that direction myself. Definitely not.
Boy, I didn't even know that this stuff even exists. Jesus Christ, you guys. What are you telling me about? Uh, Also, what is actually interesting with with with
Bye,
with with
Ruby.
with your book is also that again, this is the strength of the female character because she negotiates certain things. I think that that's actually an important sort of subtext as well. I mean, there's a scene where oh, let's bring the book. Is anybody wants to ask a question? We have 10 minutes left. If somebody wants to ask Professor James here, and you want to take the hot seat,
Professor
um,
James is my sister.
ah, well, okay,
There you
you
go.
can borrow the title for.
Yep.
Um, okay, no more questions here from the audience. Does anybody want to sit down? Jessica, do you want to sit down? No, people are very shy. That's okay. I mean, I am shy. So then let's bring the book display back down, please, and let's do another reading. We have a third reading. Jessica says she likes cats. Can we know about the cats?
Ah,
Oh,
I'm a huge cat fan. I have two cats.
are there cats in the books?
There's one
A
cat in
lot
the
of cat?
book.
There's
There's
only
one
one.
cat in the book. The cat behind you, Drax, sitting by the
Yeah.
stove, is
I
in
was
the
think
book. The cat
it's
isn't.
but it's only this one cat.
So far, there's only one cat in the book. Yes.
Ah, I see. Stella has a general question. What did you learn most about transitioning from financial writing into the world of necromancer? You probably say, well, it's the same thing with day traders. They're basically zombies, but they're already above ground. Boom.
um, I actually did a maths degree, and I'm quite an average mathematician, but I'm very good at explaining financial stuff. So if you give me a chart, I can explain to someone what the bit on the chart means.
Hmm.
And that's apparently my skill as a financial journalist, is explaining complicated stuff in to people who don't know about that topic. And I think actually that's a really useful skill, because I worked at that for years. So when I'm trying to explain what's going on to someone, I've got a good grounding in that. So
Hmm.
when I was trying to come up with a scene, or trying to come up with the metaphysics behind necromancy, um, people had said that when you're writing, it's really hard to explain what's going on. And actually, that's a thing that I don't really have a problem with, because that's the thing I spent 15 years doing before I started being a novelist.
And also, what I talked with Shyla about. By the way, your back is to the audience. I'm just saying. I was at a Miles
Oh,
Davis concert once, and it was cool. So I'm not. I don't want to judge. He did that. If he didn't, not all the time, but Miles Davis famously turned his back to the audience at times. Um, um, and that is the sign of a great artist who does what he or she wants. But Shyla told me with this interview that she read or watched with you, you also mentioned that working on deadlines. This is something that resonates with me because I come from radio and there was always a deadline. And in the beginning, it's terrifying, it's anxiety inducing, and then you learn that a certain frame like that can help you make decisions. And sometimes you feel rushed, but very often when you get into this flow and you accept this and then you're a freelancer and you create these deadlines for yourself, they create a certain focused frame that very oftentimes is very good for the end product, I think.
I mean, I think that for me, I probably someone who benefits from deadlines. I'm quite happy to stretch out doing something and then suddenly the deadline's approaching and I manage to knuckle down to it. Um, from that perspective, I'm not the ideal author because you can't knuckle down and write a book. You have to have been doing that for 4 months.
Hmm.
There's a limited amount of time you can make up for. But I think just learning to sit down and just write until you're out of words, that was a good to have had a few years of practice doing that. I think it served me well.
And I think you're also suggesting that this might, I mean, this is very dependent on the personality that you have. And sometimes it's, and I think that that's important to acknowledge what kind of type you are and and if that works for your specific personality. Okay, last reading, but before, of course, Stranger here in I wanted to make the comment, but Stranger made this comment in the local chat. He says, try writing about the metaphysics behind capitalism might be scarier than vampires.
I mean, yeah, I actually my specialty was corporate bonds, um,
Mhm.
which is a particularly esoteric part of the financial universe, and particularly out about how to price and value corporate bonds. And there's a lot of maths in there, and the fact of the matter is that most of the people who are buying and selling them don't understand it.
Hmm, that is so surprising to me. Sorry,
Mm,
that was a sarcastic comment.
yeah, and
Um,
I and I was at a university lecture, not at my own university. In fact, I'd gate crashed one a couple of weeks ago in London, where someone was talking about how to price a particular kind of bond, and it turns out that the way that they price it in the city is a kludge. They use an abbreviated version of the real formula to price the bonds because the whole formula is too complicated and it never matters except when you're talking about this particular kind of bond. And
hmm,
suddenly, none of them could work out why all the prices were off and why they were all losing money because none of them had ever understood the original maths in the first place. They'd just been given that formula and used it for years and never realized that it was just an approximation for the real thing.
wow,
And
it's almost as if the
yeah,
financial sector or the financialization of the entire society
yeah,
is being led by other utter idiots.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm. It's
So
almost
that,
as if there's such a thing as necrocapitalism. Actually, there is, and there's a fantastic book called Necrocapitalism, a journal, I believe. I'm going to look it up and put it in the local chat. Alice, I'm sorry, we only have 7 minutes left, and I don't want to
let's see
rush
how far
you.
we get. Let's see how far we get.
Y-
Okay.
don't feel rushed. If you want to read this, please do, because this is also a fun little segment about the history of
Yeah.
Tony, where she started. Let's do this.
Let's see how far we get.
Read the
I
whole thing. Read the We'll go
okay.
over.
I was 7 years old when I raised the family dog. Raising pets isn't a good idea. Raising animals is a bad idea, full stop. Their spirit leaves the moment they die, and what you get back is hungry, angry, and confused. And if you wait too long, demon infested. It didn't get that far because my grandfather came into the room as I was hiding on top of my own wardrobe from a foaming mass of enraged zombie Jack Russell, and he banished the hell out of the thing. I nearly lost a toe from zombie dog bites, and I was grounded for a month. Goodness knows what would have happened if we'd had a German Shepherd. But I couldn't help it after that. It was a compulsion. I raised a wasp and was stung 6 times until it ran out of venom, and I squished it. Grounded for a week. I raised a mouse and then had to crush it with a croquet mallet. 2 weeks. Then I practiced in secret on my brother's dead hamster. I dug it up and locked it back in its cage, which I hid in my wardrobe. I raised it and commanded the poor little sod for nights on end until it smelt so bad that my grandfather worked out what I was doing. I'd been experimenting by feeding it muesli to see if it would calm down, but it never did. On about day 3, it started to rot. By the time I was found out, it was a maggot infested lump running around the cage on 2 festering stumps trying to bite me whenever I dared to throw muesli at it. After that, Robert Windsor realized that it might be better to teach me some basic safety techniques rather than to just keep grounding me. He'd tried shouting, threatening, and taking his belt off, and nothing had worked 1 iota, so we cut a deal. In the day, he coached my brother in football. At night, he taught me to raise the dead. In return, I agreed not to practice on my own. And he was a good tutor, thorough and strict, and excellent at setting coursework. He taught me how to lay a circle of protection, how to summon, how to tell if a raised body was empty and vulnerable to demons. He taught me how to banish efficiently and how to command the undead. And in between learning how to put on mascara, wear high heels, and dance the Macarena, I think I was a pretty good student. But it took a long time to get to that point. The first time he and I raised the mortal human dead together was on my 8th birthday. We summoned Ethel Maybank, who until 5 days previously had run the village shop. I think my grandfather had underestimated the strength it takes to call the deceased back from the underworld. He didn't start until he was in his 40s. After I'd brought back and dismissed dear old Ethel, I threw up and then slept for 2 days. But like singing or ice skating, or snogging to be honest, it got better. Though nothing compared to the rush I got that very first time when Ethel had slipped out of the fresh earth of her grave, rather more easily than I shrug off my bedcovers in the morning. Blink and you'll miss it. The dead creep easily from their graves and return with just as little fuss, and the earth like a lake of sinking sand, welcoming them back to their rest. My teacher laid down some ground rules for me. Number 1, never raise without a circle. Number 2, never break the circle. Number 3, never linger with an empty course, send it straight home. And if you messed up number 3, there were a whole load more rules and one very, very cross grandparent.
And that's again from Grave Sequence, the first book in the Lavington Windsor series. So 2 books are coming next year. Alice, absolutely awesome. Big round of applause uh, for Alice. Here's the Stephen King influence a little bit with raising.
Drax, thank you so much for asking me to come on today. It's been amazing fun learning how to use the Second Life universe, and I didn't fall off a roof last time we were practicing. You did that?
Yeah, we were jumping off. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. I showed
Um,
you the wrong path, and then oops, there we
um,
were.
and thank you to Ruby for creating this amazing set, and everyone who's come along today. Really enjoyed it, and I hope that some of you will feel inspired to dip into the world of Tony Windsor and her crazy zombie romances.
Absolutely. Or we will I don't know, we'll turn into zombies if we don't do this. Um, Let me just say also big thank you to Jess from Rebellion Publishing again for sending a copy to me because reading on paper is the best. Let me look through the chat if there's some other comments here. No, you can sit down, Alice. I'll go through the credits, and then if people want to stick around, they can stick around. And I'll also ask if people have places to go or if people have events. They can put those events in there. Um, Now, uh, where was I? Yes, credits. The credits are where are my credits? The Second Life Book Club. When does it happen? Every Wednesday at 12 o'clock Pacific time, 12 o'clock Second Life time. And you can send us an email at slbookclub@draxtor.com. You can recommend things or critique things. Jessica says this is a Christmas dinner book. Absolutely, and it's a book where a lot of stuff is devoured and eaten. Um, the show is produced by Isabel Sharon, Shala the Super Gecko, and myself. Location manager, master builder is Ruby. The avatars are made by Ruby, and the research is uh, by Shyla the Super Gecko. And I'm still thinking about this whole thing where you were saying, Alice, about this was really fantastic, talking about having something as a day job, and I'm going to think about this a little bit. Maybe we'll get some good feedback from the community as well. uh, how do you make your passion a day job and then don't lose that passion when it becomes something that you have to do? Anyway, we have a lot of sponsors. The sponsors are here on the display. Just click around and find your the objects here that you like and frequent those vendors here in Second Life, and tell them that the book club sent you. So that is a way to support the program. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Draxter. Please hit the like button as well. And if you like, you can join. There is three join levels. There is Drax Bro, Drax Fan, and Drax Stan. And maybe after today, I'll finally add a Drax Sis because Bro may be a little bit too misogynistic. I don't know. Please don't forget to tip the volunteer staff. If you have some Linden shekels flying around, please do that and post your pictures on Flickr and tag Alice James in there. If you post pictures on the Second Life Flickr page, put put Alice's name in there, or I always do that, and I always go through them and then post Alice's website as well, because that is something that then gets associated with that picture and that gets a lot of play. Next week we have Corey L. Lee. Interestingly enough, complete coincidence, she's also with Rebellion. Um, this is kind of cool. This is a complete coincidence that it's scheduled that way because people go into a slot that becomes available. Corey L. Lee has two books out, Weave the Lightning and The Storm's Betrayal. She will come in a fully militarized uniform, and there may be tanks on the set. So this is also, I think, a book about communism or something. So we'll see. And that's going to happen next Wednesday right here on the Second Life Book Club. Thank you all for coming. Goodbye.